Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Iron Kraken podcast. This is episode 3, and with us tonight is Dan Karaban, one of my good friends, and also a very good tournament player that I always meet down in the city and Brooklyn. Dan is with us tonight to discuss some Nurgle armies. Not necessarily Maggotkin, but also some different types and different kind of experimentalists that he's been running. 2 of them are going to be competitive, and then we'll debut a fun little list that he came up with. So, Dan,
didn't actually come up with it. I worked with Emma. You know Emma, right?
Yeah, I know Emma. I know. I saw those. Chaos mammoths, in there.
Yeah.
So just introduce yourself, Dan. Tell us how you got into the hobby first of all, so people that don't know you get to find out a little more about you.
Sure.
And then a little rundown of what attracted you to Nurgle.
So I first started the hobby when I was around 12, and a Games Workshop opened up in my neighborhood. And my dad thought it was, a new video game store, and he took me there, and he's regretted it ever since.
That's amazing.
So, yeah.
Like all the parents walk into the Warhammer stores saying, "Do you sell video games?" And they're like, "Nah, that's next door. That's the GameStop."
Yeah, and so I was playing Warhammer Fantasy Battles since around 2003. I stopped playing for a little bit in around 2008, 2009, because that's when the recession hit and the store closed, and I wasn't about to spend the Metro card fare to get to the 8th Street store in Manhattan, because I was a poor kid whose all the money was already going to Warhammer. I didn't need to spend an extra $5 a week. And there was, because the store just closed, the location was always crowded. So I took a break, and after college, I came back. I got into to 40K. And then I was looking at the 8th edition Islands of Blood set, and I'm like, you know what? This has been out for a while. I'm going to wait till 9th edition before I get into fantasy.
Okay.
And as we all know, that didn't happen.
Yeah, the end times happened, and that was a fun little moment in history for the game of fantasy in relationship to Games Workshop.
So I wasn't sure how the new game was going to play. And at the time, the store had one of those boxes that they used to do whenever a new army was released, or maybe it was for the holiday, I wasn't sure. They had it of Khorne Demons. And I thought, well, Khorne's in the starter set, and if I buy this, I can get the Khorne starter set, and if I hate the game, I'll just use them in 40K, win-win.
Okay, that's a good strategy. A lot of new players get like dual armies that they can play in either system,
And so I started off with the Khorne, and I was enjoying it. And I thought, you know what? The first General's Handbook came out. And in the first General's Handbook, there was a rule set for playing a massive game of Archaon versus Nagash. And Nagash had all of his lower detachments, and one led by one of each Mortarch, and Archaon had one of his led by with each Chaos Allegiance. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go with Nurgle. And I'm with Nurgles to be my next force. I'm going to build this out slowly. And this was before the Maggotkin book came out. And then I was playing at a club, and someone mentioned that they were selling their Forge Road Grid and Clean one for $80. I'm like, well, now I have to buy it. And I've been playing, I strictly played Nurgle since then. So for around a year before the book came out to around Nova 2019, I was just working on Nurgle. And I started by picking up the demons because once again, if I didn't like the army, we'll just switch them over to 40k. And then my first list, I also bought a lot of the Slaves to Darkness stuff because Slaves to Darkness could be used in 5 separate armies. So if I don't like them in here, maybe they'll be good in here, and they could be part of my core, and then I can use them in the Nurgle. So I was trying to be as efficient as I could be with the money that I had at the time. And so I started to play Nurgle, and then the book came out, and everyone started to play Nurgle. And I wasn't exactly happy. I like to play. I like to have that unique army. I don't want to come in and be like, "Oh, you're playing this? Okay, this is just to be a repeat of something that I play every other week."
It's actually pretty tough to play against the mirror match with Nurgle because a lot of the abilities, like the trees and everything, like most of the abilities don't even do anything, and then your trees give your opponent summoning points and things like that. So it's a very tough matchup.
Yeah, it can be
kind of boring too.
It can be an annoying matchup, but the good thing is not that many people play Nurgle. So it's the annoying part of the time is there was a few people that was playing Clan Pestilence, and Clan Pestilence would get all the benefits of Nurgle without any of the downsides, or without a lot of the downsides.
Right.
So, but I wasn't too thrilled with that, so I tried to make my Nurgle list a bit more unique by incorporating all the other stuff that Nurgle can use. And I'm going to go into a bit more detail about this later, but Nurgle has the widest roster that you can choose from out of every army, with the exception of Cities of Sigmar, only because Cities of Sigmar can take in 1/4 Stormcast or 1/4 Sylvaneth or 1/4 KO. Besides that, Nurgle has the largest amount of different war scrolls at like 61. And I think cities without the extra Stormcast or Sylvaneth or KO have around 59. So Nurgle has the most options. So I thought I started exploring with it, and I started to tinker around the the original Plague Touched Warband. So I'm like, I'm not going to play with a lot of the stuff in this book. I'm going to stick to Slaves to Darkness and play Nurgle that way, and I'll still use my cool, great, and clean one. I'll still have fun with that. And then people started to switch off Nurgle, so I'm like, okay, I can start playing the normal stuff now. And 2nd edition came out, and they got rid of the old Plague Touch Warband, unless you were.
When did you start playing tournaments? Like once you got your Nurgle list, and once you started kind of getting your head around all the rules and everything, was it during 2nd edition, or was it during the Wild West days?
It was still in 1st edition. There wasn't much of a tournament scene until after the first General's Handbook. I definitely remember being in a tournament, and the only book out at the time I think was Bone Splitters and Sylvaneth. So like early 1st edition, because I didn't really go to win. I went to have a day of playing different people and playing armies I haven't played against.
Right, which is actually one of the best ways to do that is in tournaments.
So like what my personal opinion is, if you're ever going to play an army against an army that you haven't played against, expect to lose, just because you're not going to have that experience of what each army's weakness is. And I think that just getting as much gaming in as possible, even if you're not doing the best that you can, is just a good way to get that practice in for a competitive edge.
A lot of people get scared when they hear tournaments. They think ultra competitive, ultra kind of salty people trying to get into the game and stuff like that. But actually, a lot of the best times I've had and the best games I've played was in tournaments, and I made a lot of friends doing it. So.
No, absolutely. What it comes down to with tournament play is if you keep winning, you might run into some of those people. That's just the nature of how it is. There's always going to be people who are super aggressive or super I want to win in tournaments. And that can be, a little bit of a downer, but that's only going to be one round out of 4, 5, the 3, 4, 5, 6. And there will be other games that completely make up for bad experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I was at Nova, I've played against some people who were ultra rules lawyery, and I played against people who we just sat down, had a great time. And I'm not even playing if Nova happens, unfortunately, at this point. I wasn't planning on entering the GT. I was just going to play the narrative just because it's so much fun. The guys who run it are great. And I get to just mess around and play games. And I don't have to wake up as early, which is the most important.
Yeah, absolutely. That's always a plus, you know.
I went in to competitive play with the goal that I want to win with something that the community does not consider a meta army. Mm-hmm. And I achieved that goal, and I'm pleased with that.
All right. So, I mean, now that we kind of segued into more like competitive events and stuff like that, what's your competitive history? Like you've mentioned Nova a little bit. I've seen you a couple of times with Martin Orlando at his events at the Brooklyn Strategist, Mythicos. So give us a little bit of background.
I've been to a few GTs. Mostly I've been to Triumph. I've been to Euro GTs that you've hosted. I've been to the one-day events that Martin runs, and I've been to Nova, and I've done local a few times. Mostly I will end up in the top 3, going 2-1 or 3-0 in a one-day event. In the first time I did Nova, I went 4-2, and the second time I did Nova, I went 5-1, with the 1 being a minor loss. So I think I got 3rd base in the Nova GT with a Nurgle army when it was not considered meta. But then my painting score knocked everything down.
We could definitely help you with that if you're looking for any help. Yeah. And I'm definitely looking for some competitive help myself, because I'm all about the hobby, not necessarily so much about like the ultimate meta army or kind of understanding the ins and outs of rules. So building a nice community.
Yeah. So do you want to start talking about the lists? So
absolutely. I mean, there's 3 lists that Dan made. The first one, let me just go through it, because actually one of my pet peeves in podcasts is that they kind of skip around and they stop and stuff like that when they're going through the lists. So the first list that you sent me is an Allegiance Nurgle list.
Spoiler.
Yeah, spoiler. Yeah. Hence the little, background wallpaper there. So his leader, he has a Verminlord Corruptor, that's 280 points, Lore of Virulence. He has Favorite Toxics. Then he has Festus, the Leech Lord, for 140 points, Lore of Malignance, Blades of Putrefaction. Then he has a Chaos Sorcerer, Chaos Lord on Demonic Mount. That's 170 points, which is his general. And he gave him the Grandfather's Blessing battle trait. Then he has an artifact which is the Witherstaff. Then he has a Chaos Sorcerer Lord with Foulness of Maleficent Bubos, I guess. Okay. Bubos or boobs or whatever. Okay, then he has, for his battle line, he has 30 Plague Bearers, 40 Chaos Marauders with Flails. I'd like to know why with Flails. Then he has 5 Putrid Blight Kings, 5 Putrid Blight Kings. Then for his others, he has 10 Chaos Knights with ensorcelled weapons. All right, Dan, take it away.
So it's actually not supposed to be Flails. I just entered everything in the War Scroll Builder. I forgot to check that.
Okay.
That's my mistake. This is the variant of my list that I went 5-1 in at Nova 2019. Unfortunately, since then, the the two things happened. One, the Plague Monks got nerfed, and the Slaves to Darkness Battle Tome came out. So I switched the Plague Monks for Chaos Marauders, and I used to ally in a Contorted Epitome, but I replaced that with a Chaos Sorcerer Lord.
Right.
So this list borrows from 3 separate books. It's using the Magican book, it's using the Skaven book, and it's using the Slaves to Darkness book. And is one of the benefits of having such a massive roster that you can take from. The reason why I chose the Verminlord Corruptor is because, in my opinion, he's just a budget Great and Clean one. Whenever I played with the Great and Clean one, he had the problem of being relatively slow moving and being on a large fat base that if I'm playing on a dense terrain table, he has trouble navigating around. So the Verminlord Corruptor is 4 wounds less, unfortunately, but he has more than double the speed. He has the same after save. He doesn't heal, but his spell, which is I think is very important, can cut a unit in half from mortal wounds. I've played games where he's completely single-handedly killed an entire unit between the damage and then battle shock.
Yeah, I mean, I just played against one of their variants, the Warp Seer, yesterday, and it took me 3 turns to get through him.
Yeah, and the Corruptor is for 280 points. He's a 2 cast wizard, and there's the odd bonus that if you're playing against Skaven and they put a Gnawhole on your side of the table, he also gets +1 to cast.
Yeah, and then you can use Skaven can use other Skaven's Gnawholes, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is something that has definitely caught other players from a loop where I'm suddenly getting +1 to cast, unbeknownst to them. Festus the Leech
Sneaky.
Lord. Yeah. Festus the Leech Lord. I prefer him over a regular caster because he's able to heal, and for 20 more points, you get one of the best spells in the game, which has permanently reduced someone's armor save.
Yep.
I do not know how you can beat that. But Blades of Putrefaction is the other best spell available for Nurgle. The fact that you could... We're going to get more into why that spell is very abusive. I take the Chaos Lord on Demonic Mount as my general, partly because I have a Metal Archaon and the old Metal Archaon on a horse, and I think that's the most appropriate thing to use him as. And I'm not going to go into battle without that model if I'm playing Chaos. And then I have a Chaos Sorcerer Lord. For 110 points, he essentially is a 2-cast wizard because he's always casting Mystic Shield on one of your Slave to Darkness units.
Okay.
I think is, once again, you're about generating value in how to make a very competitive list. And I think the Verminlord Corruptor is generating value by being a cheap alternative to your other options. The Festus the Leech Lord is generating value by 1, casting the spells that you need, and 2, being able to permanently essentially increase the stats of all your other guys by reducing the stats of your opponent. So for my battle line, when I make a list, I want to have 3 foci of power. There are lists that normally revolve around 1 strong unit or 1 Death Star, and I am never a fan of those armies just because that unit could get tied up, or they could get baited, or they can get ignored, and then a large portion of your forces are going to just not be present. A large percentage of your resources aren't going to be able to be used. So I like to have 3 different strong blocks, and by doing that, it also gives me 3 strong prongs of attack on objectives depending on what the mission that's being played. So I have 30 Plague Bearers. They are the They're a very defensive option. In my 100 or so games of playing Nurgle, they have only ever been killed in one turn once, and that was by a Frost Lord on Stonehorn that made a 12-inch charge and killed 10 of them off that. So it was like, I can't do anything about good rules.
Right. No, I mean, at the end of the day, it's still a dice game, so
Yeah.
like shit happens.
Yeah. So not with flails is the Chaos Marauders. And the reason why I take them is because I don't know if Games Workshop realized how stupidly powerful these guys are. They have a rule that says when you charge, you change the lowest dice to a 6. And in Nurgle, you can always assume that you're going to have run in charge because you are going to dictate where your tree is going to go, and you can always summon another tree. So you're going to be able to dictate how your troops move. So you can always, if you need it, you can always use that command point to make a 6-inch run. So these Marauders, at minimum, if I roll a Snake Eyes on my charge, can threat something from 21 inches away. That is a scary amount of speed for foot troops.
Yeah, especially when you have 40 of them coming at you,
Yeah. If there is a 1 in 6 chance that they charge 13 inches, which is terrifying, especially after you move 13 with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then
they're affected if they have the keyword Nurgle, they get affected by the trees. That's what you're saying, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
So the other bonus is because this is the first book that was written for 2nd edition, it does not have a lot of the current rules text that you find in more modern books. Blades of Putrefaction still triggers on a modifiable hit roll of a 6.
Yeah.
So
because it says 6+ on it, right?
So the other unit that I use is Chaos Knights. Both Chaos Knights and Chaos Marauders have a way that they could get +1 to hit. Chaos Knights can get it from the command ability of the Chaos Lord on Demonic Mount, and Chaos Marauders get it for having enough models of the unit. So if I make that minimum 21-inch charge with Blades of Putrefaction, I can easily be getting 25 mortal wounds in if everyone gets into combat after the pile-in, which isn't too hard to say if you make, a 27-inch charge or 26-inch charge.
Plus the 3 inches. Did you count the 3? Yeah.
And plus the 3-inch pile-in and the 1-inch reach.
Exactly. So
you can, and that's not including the other types of speed that you can get from elsewhere in this army. This army is deceptively fast. You look at Nurgle and you're thinking, there's a bunch of fat guys. They are going to get on you real quick. And I take 2 units of Putrid Blight Kings to fill out the battle line, and I take out and to protect the flanks. I like them on the sides of my army. I think they're one of the MVPs of a Nurgle list, and we're going to get into that more. So there's some strategies that I like to use with this, and that comes down to alpha blocking and alpha charging. So for what those mean is alpha generally refers to what's going to happen on your first turn. Mm-hmm. This is going to, all be dependent on how things are placed, how terrain is done, and what my matchup is, and most importantly, if I get my Blades of Putrefaction spell resolve. If that spell resolves, then I'm going to alpha strike with my unit of Chaos Marauders. And I'm going to try and get those 80 attacks in with the Blades of Putrefaction. But that's your alpha strike where you try to charge first turn and do as much damage. Alpha blocking is I use with my knights. Now, a lot of people don't like taking knights in units of 10, and that's because they take up such a massive amount of space on the field. They're on the large cavalry bases, and there's 10 of them, and if you put them sideways, they'll take up like 36 inches, maybe even more.
Wow. And alpha blocking just means preventing the alpha's attack from reaching you.
Yeah.
They're like a roadblock, basically.
Yeah, I'm setting them up as a roadblock. Sometimes that will involve me charging in with them, but not necessarily with the intent to kill. I use this to stop my opponent from advancing, and because these are Chaos Knights, they're going to have a 4-up armor save that you can reroll the ones because of the Chaos Sorcerer Lord, and then they're going to have a 5-up against mortal wounds, and then they're going to have 30 wounds in the unit. It is something that is going to take a while, 1 or 2, maybe even 2.5 rounds of combat to chunk through that unit and actually be able to move. And
Wow.
And by doing that, you're stopping your opponent from capturing the objectives that you're scoring points on.
Right. Do you move them forward and then just kind of like have them in the mid-board?
So I always try to keep my tree in the center of the board. One, because you don't necessarily know what side of the table you're going to start on.
Right.
When you place it. And by having it in the center, you give the most mobility and control for where you're going to go. Again, remember, it's not wholly within 7 inches. Only one part of a tiny bit of the model has to be within 7 for you to get that run and charge. So I can have one Marauder string back to get that extra 8-inch charge, or I can have one bit of a Night base sitting back and make an additional charge just for more movement, just to cover more spots of the board.
So, but also just really quickly, how do you mitigate I'm counting here, you have 11 drops. Is that correct? Okay, yeah. So you're basically going second most of the time?
You just don't care. Okay. If there's so many armies are going to be able to get the drop on you, and so many armies aren't going to be able to get the drop on you. Some armies are built to go second, some armies are built to go first, and the best thing that you can do is adapt. So I could always, if I'm up against an opponent who's like, this player is highly aggressive, he might actually want to go second instead of going first. So maybe I would decide I'm not going to use my plague bearers as a screen, and I'm going to use them to hold this objective in my deployment zone. There's a lot of benefit for going first. There's a lot of benefit for going second. If my opponent says you go first, cool. Now I have a chance to charge in my Marauders. If my opponent says I go second, cool. Now I have a chance to double turn you and attack with all these things. So having more drops isn't that important. I think it's only really important when you're trying to pull off some insane combo, or there's some armies that need to go first. Like if you're Fire Slayers, you need to go first so you can get off your banner, your +1 armor, all your cool little tricks that make your units unkillable. But
exactly, yeah.
But if you don't have any of those needs, and I can always, protect my guys with the screen, or because I'm so fast, I can deploy farther back. It's really matchup dependent, and it's really knowing what you're facing and how quickly everything can get to you.
Yeah, and some of the best players are adaptive players, not the ones that are running the best and meta list, as you're kind of proving, Yeah.
So like some of the top armies right now are going to be like Tzeentch Change Host, or lists that can fit their entire army in one drop. So if you can build yourself as a 1 or a 2 or a 3 drop list, don't bother. Don't care about it, because there's going to be people that are going to build that 1 drop and they're going to outdrop you, and there's nothing you can do about it. So it's better to build an army that can deal with either going first or with going second, and just change your style as you play.
Very good point.
So for tips with just playing as Nurgle in general, the most important thing for your army is maintaining control of your wheel. By maintaining control of your wheel, you are making the best of your allegiance abilities. You do not know where the wheel is going to start when you play the game. But there, on the good side, there are 4 very good spots and 2 dead spots. So more often than not, you're going to end up with something that's very good. Either you're going to get +2 to your movement, you're going to get an entire army-wide +1 to wound, which is insane. You're going to get making your opponent reroll 6s to wound, which is great. Or you're just going to do some mortal wounds to a target right off the bat.
Right.
And because of that, I always try to take 3 or 4 spellcasters as much as I can, just so I can try and control that wheel as much as possible. And that's also why I use my once per game command trait to try and control it as well.
Yeah, just go over the different ways a Nurgle player can control the wheel.
So the main thing is, for those who don't know, the wheel changes at the start of every battle round. So it's not going to change in your hero phase. The effects will happen in your hero phase, but there are some times in which it is just dead and doing nothing. So you can control it through the lore spell that Nurgle has. It casts on a 7, and then you can change it to any spot on the wheel of your choice. If that is one of the most important spells in your army, because name one other spell in the game that says your entire army gets +1 to wound for this turn.
Yeah, I mean, +1 to wound is also like a rare thing just in general in this game.
Yeah.
There's a lot of +1 to hits or rerolling ones, but rerolling wounds or +1 to wounds, is a rare thing.
Yeah. So if you roll a 1 for your on the wheel, that gives 2 inches to all your Nurgle movement, which is, once again, that's making your Marauders and Chaos Knights so much faster and giving them so much more ground to cover. And then by the next turn, when you're in combat, it's going to go over to the +1 to wound, and that's going to be great for you. If you're on a 5, then you're gonna make your opponent reroll wound rolls of 6s in the combat phase, and that's going to give a lot more consistency. Adds a lot more to your defense. And the 6 is just amazing for picking off random units or trying to wheel down enemy heroes. Ideally, you either always want it on 5 or you always want it on 2. So then you take that once per game command trait, Grandfather's Blessing, to, at the start of a turn, move it 1 spot in either direction. So because it happens at the start of the turn, it triggers at the same time when all of the other hero abilities trigger. So if I'm on spot 5 and I go to spot 6, I get D3 mortal wounds on D3 targets, and then I move it back to 5. And then next turn, I'll get to do that 6 again.
So both spots kind of like trigger. So you do the D3 and then you move it back in your hero phase.
You can trigger both spots with the command ability. If you use the spell, it does not trigger both because it's no longer at the start of your hero phase. But you'd still get the passive effects. Spots 3 and 4. 3 is just about dealing damage to people in your terrain. It's relatively useless. And 4 is rerolling Battle Shock test of 1 for enemy units, which is kind of also useless. They're not really doing much for you. It's all about spots 5 and 2 on the wheel. So when we look at why spot 5 is so good, because rerolling 6s to wound isn't necessarily, like, it's good, but I don't think it's as good as rerolling 6s to hit. And but you're also getting reroll 6s to hit from your Witherstaff. So now your opponent is always going to be rerolling 6s to hit if you're able to control where the Witherstaff is on the board. And as a Nurgle player, you're either always running or you're either always in combat. There is no reason, unless you're sitting up camping on an objective, you're always trying to move and always trying to control where your debuffs are. Being at -1 to hit against Plague Bearers and then also having to reroll your 6 to hit is going to be disgusting. Some people like to take the Lord of Blights, who can make your Plague Bearers -2 to hit.
Mhm.
And then if you have the Witherstaff available on top of that, your opponent is never going to hit you if they have a 4+ to hit. They literally will only, because they're going to be hitting on 6s, and then you reroll all 6s to hit. So
Yeah, that's so obnoxious. It's ridiculous.
they're going to attack 3 or 4% of the time. That's how much is going to go through. And the Witherstaff it's always the first thing you take as an artifact, because there's so many abilities in this game which proc on 6s to hit. Either they'll generate extra attacks, or they'll do mortal wounds, or they'll do this or that, or this attack will suddenly do that. And by negating the chance of that happening is so powerful. Like, it shuts off half of Slaaneash's Allegiance abilities.
Yeah, that's pretty massive right there. Mm-hmm.
And to have that is very powerful. So it is the first thing I put in every list that I take. And that's just, it is, like, there are other great artifacts available to Nurgle. Like, there's another way to permanently reduce armor save within the Nurgle artifacts.
The Rust Fang, right?
Yeah, the Rust Fang. But it's not as important as that consistency of removing your opponent's abilities to trigger, or just, even if you're only getting rid of like 11% of their attacks, it's still 11% of the attacks that you're not having to deal with. You're still essentially giving yourself more of a defense because of that item. And Nurgle already specializes in defense.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
The second list I want to talk about.
Wait, before we move on, talk a little bit about summoning and how that plays in your list, just as an overall arching idea.
So summoning in Nurgle is very interesting because it doesn't scale with the game. All that matters is what is present on the table and where they are present on the table for your stuff and your opponents. You're always going to get a set amount of points each turn, and summoning with Nurgle in a 2,000-point game isn't that great. Other armies can outpace you with summoning, but if you're playing a 500-point game, your summoning is the best in the game because it's performing just the same as the other armies, as the other armies would at a higher points level. So normally what I'd use the summoning for is to protect objectives in the back, to create small screens, just by summoning 5 plague bearers, so you have to walk around them, or you have to charge them instead of something else. And that's what I use the summoning for, unless I can use it to also get another tree. Because if your first turn, if you're going first, there is a 1 in 3 chance that you start the game with 7 contagion points. By doing that, now you can move up and run before you have the tree present, and then drop the tree, and then gain the extra ability to charge after that. So saving those points for a tree is also adding extra mobility when you need it, which is also very important.
What would you say about Epidemus and him being able to summon a tree turn 1? So you start the game with 2 trees.
That's not Epidemus.
Sorry. That's
Horticulus.
Horticulus. That's right. Yeah.
So I used to run him I ran him in the GT that I went 4-2 in, and I used to really like him because having those 2 trees turn 1 is going to get you to on average, you'll probably hit the amount of contagion points that you want to hit at around turn 3 and be able to drop like 20 plague bearers somewhere. And that's a really good feeling. But for the points that Horticulus is, 20 plague bearers and not have to deal with that. So I feel with like a 40, 50, 60 point reduction, Horticulus would be amazing. But unless you want to play the specific battalion that he works with, he's not going to be generating as much damage or value as you're really going to be getting. Because in the earlier days of the book, where summoning wasn't as powerful in other armies, having that resource and being able to just be like, here's 240 more points of guys on the table, deal with it, was a threatening thing. But things have escalated since then. I don't think it's as potent. I will say he's decently strong in combat. He's just not worth it for the points that he is. And with, as I said earlier, Nurgle has 61 different war scrolls to choose from in your army. That means there's a lot of heroes and a lot of people that are going to be fighting for the same roles in your army. So you have to be able to find the most efficient or the one that best fits your scenario.
Okay.
So
would you say, actually going back to Epidemus, is the one that gives you +1 to hit, +1 to wound, and +1 to summon based on the amount of... I'm sorry, what?
I think it's reroll ones.
It's reroll ones is based on how many things you've killed. So you got 7, 14, and 21. Would you ever consider replacing him instead of the Chaos Sorcerer Lord? Because it's army-wide versus one unit.
It is, but here's the thing. I kind of think he's a trap. Because what ends up happening is 7 models is very different depending on what army you play against.
Right,
imagine
exactly. Yeah.
When giants come out, are you going to kill 7 giants? Game's going to be over by then.
Right, exactly. Yeah, there might be 7 giants in the whole army or less. Like, we don't know yet.
Exactly. Killing like 7 clan rats, that's great. Killing 21 clan rats, I can do that with 1 spell. Then he's great there. But if I'm up against Iron Jaws and I'm scaring down 2 Maw Crushers and a bunch of Gore Grunters, I'm never getting his abilities off until it's too late. So because he is too matchup dependent, I don't think that he's viable. Like if you're playing narrative games, absolutely, he's fun. You gotta have a nice little D20 that you can keep on ticking up, and it's a fun experience. But then you go up against an opponent, and he's like, this is my Beastclaw Raider army. I have 2 Frost Lords on Stonehorn. Have fun. You're like, well, that's a waste of 200 points.
Exactly. And the only reason I'm asking these questions is because you did bring up the Chaos Sorcerer Lord for the, for all the buffs and stuff. So I'm just trying to think of different ways of doing the same thing because of the 61 different units in the Nurgle list.
Well, as I was talking about for value of getting your spells off, the Chaos Sorcerer Lord is also just the cheapest option for your spells because you have a bunch of different wizard options. You can take the Chaos Sorcerer Lord on Manticore. You can take the Chaos Sorcerer Lord. You can take Festus. You can take a Sorcerer. You can take the War Shrine. Not the War Shrine. You can take the Underworld's character. You can take a Verminlord Corruptor. The Chaos Sorcerer Lord just happens to be the cheapest version of getting it. So I don't need to cast the reroll hits to hit, to wound, to save. I can just use that Chaos Sorcerer Lord to cast a realm spell if you're playing in realms. Or I can use it to cast the spell that moves the wheel. It's just the cheapest amount of points Nurgle can pay for that ability.
Okay, very good. Okay.
Plus, always getting the Mystic Shield off. So it's just a nice little extra as opposed to the Sorcerer who cost 120. So he's 10 points cheaper.
10 points cheaper, yeah.
He gets that nice little extra bonus.
Awesome. All right, so let's move on to list 2 then. I think we kind of looked at list 1, and list 1, that's your go-to competitive list.
That is my go-to competitive list. The next one isn't necessarily a standard. You must always take this list. It's more of a skeleton, and you can swap out what you want with different things.
Okay, so let me just go over it real quick, and then you can talk about each one of the units. Dan's list number 2, he's got the Glotkin, the big fatty with the 3 brothers. That's 420 points. Then he has a Harbinger of Decay, 120 points with the Witherstaff. Again, his number 1 pick. Lord of Plagues, he's the general. His trait is Foul Conqueror. Then he has an artifact of Bloodshell Bowplate. Sorcerer for 120 points instead of the Sorcerer Lord, I guess, with a brooch, with an Aether Quartz brooch. Then he has Lore of Malignance, Blades of Putrefaction. Then for Battle Line, he has got 10 putrid blight kings, 10 putrid blight kings, 5 putrid blight kings, 5 putrid blight kings. So lots of fatty knights there on foot. And then he has the battalion Blessed Sons and a plague cyst.
Yeah.
Okay, Dan, take it away again.
So the reason, the first thing I want to say is the Glotkin isn't a necessary part of this list. I just think this is the best way to use him. You can swap him out for a. You can take him out and make one of the 10-man Blight King squads a 5-man, and then you can put in the Lord of Afflictions and 4 Pascal Blight Lords. That's, I think, what Paul Conti does.
Okay. Yep.
And or you can take him out, change one of the 5-man to a 10-man, and add Gutrot, Spume, and Festus. And that's another list I've seen people run. The main idea behind this list is using the Blessed Sons Battalion. A lot of people like using the Blight Cyst, and what the Blight Cyst does is it gives -1 rend to all of your Blight Kings, and that's really strong. But at the same time, I don't think it's as valid as taking the Blessed Sons, because first off, the Blessed Sons makes your army, if you have all Rotbringer units, which is why you take it, it becomes a 1-drop list. So as I said, do not care about making your list a 1-drop or low drops unless it can be a 1-drop, because otherwise you cannot guarantee who goes first.
Okay, and at that point, once you have 2 1-drop lists, it just comes to a matter of like a dice roll. So
it comes down to a dice roll. So for 40 points, which is already cheaper than a command point that you're getting, it is 40 points, and you're getting gives Mystic Shield essentially to everyone in your army. So I don't even need the Chaos Sorcerer Lord, because the entire army is now rerolling save rolls of 1. And units that are above the units in this battalion that have 7 or more models do not have to take Battle Shock, which can also be useful. But once again, 40 points, an artifact, a command point, makes your list a 1-drop, and gives you an army-wide Mystic Shield. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I'd say so, definitely. I'm actually, I think you've seen my Nurgle army. I think I might try some of these lists.
Oh, absolutely. Like, your Nurgle army would fit right into this.
Yeah.
So I use the Plague Cyst, and because 1, it builds into the Blight Cyst, and 2, it gives you, as long as you're within 7 inches of the Lord of Plagues, it gives all of the Blight Kings in range reroll failed to hit instead of reroll failed to hit of 1. So now you're getting super consistent with your Blight Kings, because ideally you are already hitting on 2s. You're already hitting on 3s and wounding on 2s. So if you can re-roll those 1s and 2s, that unit is getting very scary with how aggressive they can be. Yeah. And then if you want to, for extra mobility, you can take the variant that has Gut Rot and Deep Strike 10 Vikings to be a nice little distraction and just get up in people's business. Or you can take the Lord of Afflictions, and you can take the Pusco Blight Lords and have them just be super fast and aggressive. And this is also built into the Blessed Sons host from the Wrath of the Everchosen. So not only are you getting narrative points for being, a Blessed Sons playing the Blessed Sons, but it gives what that does is your command ability says 1 unit gets to run for free each turn. And, if you're having some Pusco Blight Lords, those things are now moving real fast.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I take the Aether Quartz Brooch in this because you want to get as much value out of your command points as possible. So not only is 1 unit running a turn for 6 inches a turn for free, which is going to be more than 6 inches if it's on Future Viking, so they got +1 to run. But if you have the Glock, if you use the Glockin variant, now everything in your army is reliably always going to get +1 to attack, while keeping up the bonus 5-up save from the Harbinger of Decay. So it's really important to keep that extra feel no pain saves.
Mm-hmm.
And it really comes down to, this list is more about playing a central ball of death and expanding outward from that central focus. And from that you have, a lot of tough guys, because everyone in this list, I think, is going to have a 4-up save followed by a 5-up after save, a 4-up rerolling 1 save followed by a 5-up feel no pain save. So it gets pretty scary. And Putrid Blightings, they are the MVP of this book for me. Because first off, it is 21 wounds for 160 points.
Well, you kind of skipped to the very end question right here.
Sorry.
It's okay, no problem. But okay, you can go ahead and say what you're gonna say.
Putrid Blightings are there's other MVPs I will say that.
Okay.
But Putrid Blightings, for 160 points, have a 4-up save and 21 wounds. Most cheap infantry are going to be 80 points for 10, and they'll have a 4-up save if you're lucky. So not only are you getting 1 extra wound out of them, these guys are better in combat. Not even talking about how they explode in 6s. Just 3s and 3s for 160 points and 21 wounds with a 4-up save is a very aggressively pointed. And now you add the fact that they can run and charge, they can, or they might even move faster because of the wheel, or wound better because of the wheel.
Right.
And so these guys are very, very aggressively pointed, and they're fat. Like, they're just tough. They're 4 wounds each. They take some work to cut through them.
Absolutely. And then I like the way you are thinking about kind of farming their 6s. They're exploding 6s.
Well, unfortunately, once again, this is because it is a older version of the book, that it is not reroll all failed hit. It's not reroll all hits. It's just reroll all failed hits. So you are only going to be able to reroll the 1s and 2s, but it's still, something. And it's about getting as consistent as possible.
Well, at least their hits are now like on unmodified 6s versus a 6+.
Absolutely.
So because a lot of things before used to give -1 to hit, so then Blightings were just not really doing any damage.
Yeah, but they still pump out. They still do work.
Yeah.
Think of any unit that is as cost effective for this amount of points. If you look at Stormcast might not be the best competitive comparison, but for 20 wounds on a 4-up save with decent attacks, they're paying 200 points. And the fact that Putrid Vikings are costed this much is a testament to how I still think Nurgle has competitive legs, even if they're not dominating the tournament scene.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're playing with the other variants, like if you're playing with the plus Royal Blight Lords, you make the Lord of Affliction your general, so that way he gets the Blot Cell Bioplate, which allows him to reroll all failed saves. So now he's just another big fat guy that moves very quickly that you have to deal with. And all these things, not only do they get the free run, you're controlling where that tree lands, so you're going to be able to control where you're running and charging as well, which is very important. And I think Blessed Sons is a very strong list that just got ignored because of what you have to take. It was like, it's always assumed that the Blightcist, at least in my circles, was the stronger variant, and I never liked taking it because the command ability of the Lord of Blights is very powerful, but what it's telling you to do is have larger units to get -1 to hit. But if you want to play the Blight Cyst, you have to have small units to get the most amount of effect of your Ren -1. So it's kind of productive in that nature for me.
Yeah, I'm kind of guilty of that. I was running the Blight Cyst just for the -1.
But, it's more about consistency than anything. And you can always get the -1 to hit from the fastest Elite Lord if you really need it. Like, you always have an option. Or because you're taking 2 battalions, take a Rustfang. You have 3 artifacts to go around in this list. So, 2 because 1 has to be taken by the Blessed Sons battalion, but sub-faction. But yeah. And the reason why I take a regular sorcerer instead of the Chaos Sorcerer one is because it is mandated by the battalion.
Okay, I see. Yeah.
And yeah, so this is the skeleton of a build that I think is very competitive. You can add your own flavor to it. It is as long as you stick to Rotbringer units, it is a 1-drop list, and that is being able to choose who goes first is going to be how you determine a lot of the games.
Okay, so this list does prefer to go first, which leads me into my next question. How would you?
It's not always about going first. It's about what matchups you're playing.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
If I'm up against, a gun line, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to deploy back, stay out of your range, make you move a bit closer to me, and then I'm going to jump out of the gate charging at you. And then I have control of the double turn, so you can't use that against me.
Well, right, which is great because you can use your trees to slingshot yourself up the board with absolutely.
Yeah,
so that leads me to the next question about, like, because you kind of mentioned you kind of deploy centrally and you kind of play centrally with this list. How would it fare against different types of armies? Like, say, for example, Caradron, they can like spread out and deep strike in all different places. Are you going to get kind of like bottlenecked in an area and then not be able to take objectives or?
So once again, you can use your summoning to jump and take control of objectives if you so need to. If you just need bodies and places, you can use your summoning for that. But it's also the fact that you have the mobility to get where you need because of that free 6-inch run, and then you can use your command point for the turn to get an additional 6-point run. You can break out of the bubble, you're just not going to have all the same benefits of being within the bubble. Like, exactly. You might lose your additional 5-up save, but if you're chasing your opponents instead of your opponent chasing you, then chances are is those units aren't going to be as deadly in combat, so you're not going to need as much defensive saves.
Yeah, because if you charge something like Endriggers or something like that, you like smash them like to bits,
Yeah. Especially if it's with a unit of 10 Vikings, because even without the bonuses from the Harbinger of Decay, you're still getting. You'd still was a 10-man squad is going to have 41 wounds with a 4-up rerolling ones. That's not that easy to break, and you got to kill 4 before they even start to think about Battle Shock.
Yeah, it's pretty nasty. And by that time, you probably like take care of them, or they'll flee from Battle Shock, or they're going to use their like command points to make them, immune to Battle Shock, and you just kind of.
Or you can take the Pluscoil Blight Lords variant of this list, and they are super fast because the Lord of Afflictions has the additional move that they can do. So not only can they do the additional move, they run the 6 inches from the ability and then charge.
Right.
This list can be scary fast depending on how you built it. I put in the Kraken because it's the more magical of the variants, and without if I only have one spell to cast a turn, then I'm losing control of the wheel, which I don't like to have, which is why I put the Glotkin over the Lord of Afflictions and Pascal Blight Lords. But I feel that the other variants of the list, even without that magic, is still going to be potent. Because magic is always a gamble. You don't know if you're going to resolve it. You can be playing against Zinch and never get anything. You can play against Khorne and forget the spells. So, like, last game I played against Korn, I forgot Arcane Bolt.
It happens to the best of us, my friend.
It happens.
Yeah.
So you can. The reason why I like AOS as opposed to 40K is you're designing
well, just be careful what you say there. You might start opening up a can of worms with those guys.
Okay, I mean, fair. Just how I look at list building, and I could easily be wrong because I'm not as experienced in 40K, is when I build a list in AOS, I build how I want to play. Whereas when I play against 40K, when I play in 40K, I have to build against what I expect to see. Because that's how I see it as a difference. So when I build this list, I'm like, I want to have all these abilities and be able to be really mobile and be very central, be very defensive, and do what Nurgle does best. But there's certain weapon options in 40K where I have to be like, well, do I have to prioritize this or I have to prioritize this based on what I expect to play? And I don't think that as much in AOS. So this is the shell. This list is a shell of this list is a shell of a good way to play competitive Nurgle list, and pretty much I feel any way you take it, you can have your own unique spin and will still perform to the same degrees regardless of who you play against.
I see. Yeah. So like you're still kind of experimenting with this list, and it's like you just said, it's kind of matchup dependent, or
I only own 10 Putrid Blight Kings, so I'm not exactly excited about buying 4 more boxes, maybe, or 5.
You could borrow my 25 or 30. It's no problem.
I thought you were going to try this out. Anyway, so that's why I haven't played more with this on the tabletop. I've been doing it online, but this is what I've been feeling is fun. Plus, this is if you're going to play any of the named characters in Nurgle, I think this is the list to try and slot them in.
Okay, yeah, just experimenting with all the different variants and stuff like that. So it's a semi-competitive / fun list.
Yeah,
but it has the potential to be really strong.
I don't think this is the list that's going to win any GTs. I think this is the list that you'll take to an event or a game night with friends and have a decent gaming experience regardless of who you play against.
That's actually the point. Yeah.
So do you want to talk about the final list?
Yeah, but also don't let me forget about what you just said about digital version of the game versus real version, because we're seeing a lot of lists coming out and a lot of experimentation with things that you might not see in like the real world. Because price prohibition, or maybe people don't want to paint or don't have space for those things. So just don't let me forget to talk about that.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. So let's go to list number 3.
So this is something that I worked out with Emma Mangles.
Okay.
I hope that's how you pronounce your last name. If it's not, I'm sorry. And this list focuses around, once again, the flails are not flails. It's just what War Scroll Builder puts first.
It's not a problem.
It starts with a sorcerer.
Okay.
A Harbinger of Decay, 2 Chaos Sorcerer Lords.
Okay.
The 40 Chaos Marauders, 2 blocks of 5 Chaos Warriors, a Chaos War Shrine, 2 Chaos War Mammoths, because this is the fun list.
Of course, yeah. And then we love to see those big guys on the table.
Yeah. And they are all in a Plague-Touched Warband.
Nice. And this is how many drops? It's like the whole thing is a Plague-Touched? No.
So Plague-Touched Warband was changed, so only Slaves to Darkness can be in it. Okay. So it is a 3-drop list because the Sorcerer and Harbinger of Decay do not fit in inside of it.
Sure.
So the reason why you're reaching out to take the Sorcerer is because you need the Sorcerer to take Blades of Putrefaction. And we already talked about how Blades of Putrefaction is absolutely disgusting on a unit of Chaos Marauders. because those Marauders can move 21 inches minimum and dish out mortal wounds on 5s. If everyone gets in, then you're dealing like 24, 25 mortal wounds. And the Harbinger of Decay is needed because you are going to be an asshole with this list. Part of my
That's all right.
The Chaos War Mammoths exist because, one, they're really cool.
Okay. That's a reason in itself.
You can buff them to high hell. Defensively, that is. You can make them have a 4-up, 4-up, 5-up, 6-up save.
Okay, let's go through that.
Yeah. So they have a 4-up save, 4-up armor save normally. I believe the Chaos War Shrine can use the Blessing of Tzeentch on a unit, even though it is not Tzeentch. It just won't get the full effect. But if you do that, then they can reroll their failed saves. So you have a 4-up rerolling save, followed by a 5-up save from the Harbinger of Decay, followed by a 6-up save from the Chaos War Shrine. So you're going to be stopping a lot of damage that's coming your way. And considering you are a 22 wound monster, you're going to be stopping, you're going to be there for the long haul.
And it's only, how many points is it?
320 each.
That's not bad. That's not.
No, it is not. It is.
No.
It is scary. And like the reason why I like this list is because this can output a lot of mortal wounds, especially if you're up against really annoying lists like Ossiarch Bone Reapers that don't have a lot of models but just have really tough defense. The mortal wounds of the Chaos War Mammoths are going to crack it, and I don't think the even with the -2 rend, they're not going to take down the War Mammoth in time.
Yeah, and then you're bypassing their armor save. It's like, I mean, obviously they're playing Petrifex, because nobody else plays anything else with those guys.
There's no reason to, really.
That's actually a shame. We kind of like mentioned it with Bezo in the last podcast.
Yeah.
You're bypassing their 2-up save.
Yeah.
And just going straight into mortals.
Yeah. So you roll when they're at full health. You roll 5 dice, and on every 4-up is D3 mortal wounds. So you're going to do like maybe 5 or 6 mortal wounds from the tusk attacks, and you're going to do and then you have 10 attacks hitting on 4s and 3s, -2 rend D3 damage. And you can, once again, make that more consistent with your Chaos Sorcerer Lords. So you can have the rerolls hit to hitch and wounds. You still have access to the wheel, so that can be a +1 to wound. They're moving 14 inches if you're on spot 1. So there's a lot of speed here. Like having a mammoth go 20 inches and then being able to charge is a very real, scary thing that can happen.
Yeah, and once it does that, it becomes like an ultimate roadblock. They have to chew through all of its wounds to get through with all those like stacked buffs and DPRs.
Because that base is so fat, it is always going to be within range of something.
That's amazing.
Like the front of the base is going to be 19 or 20 inches away from a Harbinger of Decay, and you're still going to be able to get that like 7-inch radius 7-inch diameter 5-up save because
what's the base type like?
It's like a 12-inch base.
Okay,
it is long because
that's like a 200. No, it's more than that. It's like a 280 or 300 something like millimeter.
Yeah,
it's something gigantic.
It's on the same base as the Corn Dragon and the Dread Saurian.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So that's how big it is, and
that's massive.
And so when you're always going to be, because of that, you're probably always going to be within range of that run and charge and the saving of the Witherstaff. then it's going to be a bit harder to get the Holy Within from the War Shrine, though. But you're also just there to give the reroll saves and just provide more aggressive output from it. And then, also the War Shrine can just protect the Marauders, who could now have a 5-up, 5-up, 6-up.
Yeah, I mean,
on a very offensive unit.
Yeah, they're, like you said, they're very offensive, and you use them to kind of, you put Blades of Putrefaction on them, and then you fling them forward, and then they have that like 3-layered safe DPR.
It's something to get through, and it's just a fun. It's something when you sit down on the table and go, here's 2 Chaos War Mammoths. Like everyone's gonna turn heads to that table just to see what's going on.
Yeah, I mean they're definitely a showcase, model there, and then you're running 2 of them. So
the downside is they do not sell the Chaos War Mammoth anymore, and at any point he could jump over to Legends, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's ways to get it. We won't mention how.
that is true. The second that they send the Chaos War Mammoth to Legend is the second they notice their Lord of the Rings Moomock sales drop dramatically. And also, this whole list is in the Plague Touch Battalion, which, not only is going to deal is also going to deal mortal wounds to whoever's attacking you. So the one downside of this is you're going to have, the one downside of this is this is the one time you really don't want to be on spot 5 in the wheel because it's counter synergistic with the Plague Touch Warband. But slamming 40 Marauders or slamming a Chaos War Mammoth into something, and then even if it's multiple units, just trying to take as much hits as humanly possible, you're reflecting 1/6 of their wounds back as mortal wounds.
Okay, yeah.
And it's going to add up to a lot of damage.
Does that happen on DPR saves, on all saves, or does it happen only on
it's whenever they roll a 6 to wound.
Oh, right. Okay.
They roll a 6 to wound you.
Right.
They take a wound.
Okay.
So
how would you play this army? Like,
I kind of play it a bit more like the previous one, where I'd keep a central focus, where I have the War Shrine and the Harbinger in the middle, with the 2 War Mammoths on the flanks, and the Sorcerer in between one of the Mammoths and a block of Marauders. And the Chaos Warriors are just there, 1, to fill up space for the battalion, because you need 8 units for it, and to fill out the battle line requirements. But also, Chaos Warriors are, pretty decent for 5 of them for 100 points. They still hold their own, and especially if they're within Harbinger Decay range, if you try to damage them, they'll probably survive because they can once again get a reroll save rolls 1 from a Sorcerer Lord, and then they could get the Harbinger save, and then they could get the War Shrine save. There's just so many things that just makes any unit in this army very tanky. And once again, they're always going to be reflecting mortal wounds back unless you're targeting the Harbinger or the Sorcerer.
Yeah, wow. So, I mean, I've actually learned quite a few things that I kind of didn't realize about Nurgle. They're very tough. At the same time, they're very fast for some little fat dudes running around. Yeah. There's definitely a lot of synergies in there, and there's a lot to get your head around, especially with the 61, as you mentioned, units.
Yeah.
Did that increase? Because last time I counted it was 59, but
the Underworld Warband came out.
Oh, okay, that's right. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, overall, if somebody would ask you, like, okay, I want to start playing Nurgle, like, what's the key word that Nurgle is?
Nurgle is fast and tough. You're not playing Nurgle to beat someone down in a fight.
Okay.
You're playing Nurgle to outlast them in a fight and slowly whittle them down.
Great. So it's an attrition army.
Yeah. Nurgle's going to sit there and they're going to use spells, and they're going to use their wheel to output the most part of their damage, while everything else is going to sit there and hit back. And they might win. They're going to win eventually. And
so they're like, I mean, for the lack of a better term, and the times they're going through, they're like a virus. You know, they're like, they slowly make their way through the table, and they infect different areas.
Exactly.
You know? Yeah, I mean, because that's how they get summoning points too, right? It's area control. It's spreading like their grandfather's joy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, also, just something that took me like a year to learn with Nurgle. The trees trigger during every hero phase. So if your opponent's sitting on them, because I see a lot of opponents sitting on the trees trying to stop me from getting my summoning points, I personally do not. I want you to do that. My summoning points are dead to me after I get my first tree, or after I have 7 saved up to drop something. But you want to sit there and take mortal wounds for nothing, because your summoning points are worth nothing until you hit 7. So after I hit 7, either I'm getting a second tree or I'm saving it to drop something somewhere. So if by keeping units on the tree, not only are you hurting, yes, you're slowing my summoning down, but Nurgle summoning is the worst summoning in the game at the 2,000 point level. There is Nurgle summoning is super strong if you're playing small games. But once I get the tree, or once I get enough to drop a 5-man squad or a 10-man squad where I need to drop them, either what you do, the only way to stop them where Nurgle to get summoning points is to be on their trees, because it's happening regardless. Khorne gets it by having models die. I can just keep I can just try to keep one dude alive, and then you're gonna have to suicide him. Then your tithe point. Or Zinz is going to have to resolve spells. There's ways to shut that down. Celeste is going to have to, I don't even know how their stuff works after the new FAQs, but they're going to have to they're gonna have to deal wounds and hurt themselves. But Nurgle just happens. So you can slow it down, but I'm always getting, especially with how fast Nurgle is, I'm always getting somewhere between 4, 6, or 7 points a turn, and that's all I need in order to summon something. So if by triggering, it's only a 4-up, you take 1 mortal wound. But if I'm, killing one model for just having a tree there, that's great. I only use the trees to run and charge, so just giving me that extra stuff is great. The way I see it.
Yeah. I mean, they stop your summoning points, but you can still run and charge, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Nurgle summoning isn't that great to rely on, so them stopping it doesn't really do anything. And if you do, but
that's the psychological game, That's the psychological game. They're like, oh shit, like he's going to summon a bunch of stuff, and so you're tying up their units with actually needing to do anything. They're doing it themselves.
Absolutely. So either you're going to be stopping my summoning, or you're going to help me get to more models faster and place them in areas of what they need to be. So it's really just, I can't lose no matter what you do. And that's very informative. And it looks like the book inside out, and kind of you got all the tendrils out for all the other different 3 battle tomes that you mentioned, the Slaves to Darkness, let's talk there's more. They can also use Tamarkan's Horde, and they also have access to all the Forgeworld stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but let's talk a little bit, because you kind of mentioned it briefly, the new Archaon Ever-Chosen kind of supplement that came out. Do you have any opinion on that, or do you have any kind of ideas of how it's going to affect Nurgle?
The Slaves to Darkness and the Slaves to Darkness book give you the Plague Touch Battalion again, which is super strong to say, if you're going to hurt me, I'm going to hurt you back. Always, if I'm in this battalion, and that is so worth no matter how many points you're paying. And especially is because it's on the wound rolls. So whatever, if you're rolling a 6 to wound, you take a mortal wound like after combat ends. That's wonderful. And it's for every 6 you roll. I love that so much. But so the Nurgle got 3 separate, 4, I believe. 1, 2, 3, 4 separate legions, or whatever you'd like to call them. The Drowned Men exist, and they give bonuses to Puscoil Blight Lords, which is cool. I've never really been a fan of the Puscoil Blight Lords, just because I don't like how you have to you're going to be left with 1 additional model when you buy them, because one of them makes the Lord of Afflictions. Right. So that kind of stopped me from buying into them.
Are you running them as the Legion Ascendant, or you're talking about?
I'm talking about the Drowned Men.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that one is cool, but it gives you the Nurgle's Embrace rule, which the Blessed Sons also have, which says whenever one of your models dies on a 2-up, you deal a mortal wound back to someone. But if they're Nurgle, once again, we talked about how awkward a Nurgle mirror match is. If you're playing against Nurgle, then the Nurgle will heal instead. So having the option, just every Rotbringer that I have dies can potentially hit back for a mortal wound. It's not amazing. It's not going to win games, but it's something that's nice, and it's going to add in chip damage. The big thing about the Drowned Men is you get the command trait, which allows you to reroll failed charges within 14. I can use a command point for that anyway. When am I doing, do I really need, I have to use that before I roll my charge. I'd rather save the command point for if I fail and reroll on 1 unit than use that. So I don't like the command trait. I think it's a bit of a waste. So the command ability is pretty good. That also helps increase rend. You have to, but it's only on Puscoil Blight Lords, and you're not taking them in that large units usually. So I don't find that much value in it. And so the Blessed Sun's the one I like. That's the one that gives you the free run per turn, the free 6-inch run. And the artifact helps you with your defense, which is great. It also has Nurgle's Embrace. And the command ability is interesting. You use it at the start of the combat phase and pick one of your Rotbringer units. Then you pick an enemy unit that they dealt damage to in the fight phase. And if you did more damage to them than their bravery, then they take 3 additional wounds. I don't think I'm ever going to use it, but it's something that's, like if I'm fighting Skaven, like not doing 3 additional wounds, or if I'm fighting something that's susceptible to Battle Shock, doing 3 additional wounds means I'm doing 6 additional wounds because they're going to lose more to Battle Shock. Right. So for command point, I think that's worth it.
Is there a bravery debuff for me, maybe potentially that could work with it?
Well, once the Chaos Knights have a -1 bravery aura, as does the Vermin Lord also has a -1 bravery. So you can do -2 bravery on top with this to really home it in if you so desired.
Yeah, and then you've got the endless spells like the Horrorghast or something. That's a -1, plus the Shards of Vol or whatever they're called. That's another -1.
I feel like if I'm going to be playing a Bravery Bomb list, I wouldn't be going with Nurgle, though.
Yeah, no. It was just a question about,
Especially with all the Ossiarchs that just completely ignore the phase. I have another long rant about bravery that could be a whole nother episode for you.
Okay, I mean, you're welcome to come back and we can rant about bravery, because I kind of feel the same way. It's like right now it's kind of like not even a phase anymore at this point.
Absolutely. You have the Drowning Guard, which is for Nurgle demons, which is cool because you get to worsen the rend, and that's just making your Plague Bearers even tougher. And Plague Bearers can be some of the toughest cookies to crack in the game. So the Drowning Guard is viable if you're focusing on a demon army, and the munificent Wanderers are also a demon. Also have the Locusts that reduces rend. But I don't focus as much on demons. I feel like if you're going to buy into Nurgle, definitely start with the demons because you're going to need them anyway for your summoning, and it gives you a taste of how the army plays. But I'm more of a demons are the support to the meat of the faction kind of guy.
Right. And I mean, the demons start collecting blocks for Nurgle. I mean, I really kind of like it. It's very good
I bought 3
value.
of them. Wrong.
Oh yeah, no, it's one of the best value to start collecting boxes. I actually have 2 of them on the shelf there that I don't really need anymore. But if you want them, I don't know. All right, man. I mean, geez. I mean, there's so much information that you gave us here. That's really wonderful.
I mean,
so.
There's two things that we should talk about still.
Okay.
I want to give out the rest of my my MVPs. We already kind of talked about them. I talked about how much I love the Blight Kings, Plague Bearers, but only in blocks of 30. Okay. Never take Plague Bearers unless you're summoning them in anything less. If you're in a block of 20, all someone needs to do is get off a -1. All someone needs to do is get off an Arcane Bolt, and then you lose the -1 to hit. And that is the only reason you're taking them. Plague Bearers will never kill anything in combat. They have 1 attack each on 32mm bases, so they're not even fighting in 2 ranks. They even when they're buffed, they're hitting on 4s, wounding on 2s, no rend. They'll deal some damage, but they're there to stay, not kill.
Right. So you recommend because they're quite expensive actually. So
they're
you recommend
for 30.
Yeah. So do you recommend taking just 1 big unit or multiple?
If you're taking Plague Bearers at all, you take 1 block of 30 because they will stay on an objective and they will live. Because people will be like, oh, I fought against them. They're going to be a pain. I'm not going to deal with this. But you want that because you want to put them on an objective and survive and take as much punishment as you can before they die. As I said, if you're taking the Lord of Blights, you make them -2 to hit. With the Witherstaff, they suddenly become unkillable. Because you hit 3% of your attacks if you're normal hitting on a 4-up. And it is scary how efficient they can be in a block of 30. But in blocks of in a block of 10 or block of 20, there's no reason to take them. Take Chaos Warriors instead.
Exactly. At that point, they're just a point sink for no reason.
Yeah. And Chaos Marauders are the other MVP. As I said, they charge at minimum 21 inches, which is scary because I think there's only like a less than a 10% chance that if you're deploying 24 inches apart, they don't get into combat with you turn 1. It's insane. And once again, Blades of Putrefaction is one of the biggest sources of damage in your list, in any Nurgle list. So I feel like if you're trying to play a hyper competitive Nurgle army, Chaos Marauders are where you want to be. I feel there's a few traps units to take that you really shouldn't. I don't see any value in the Sloppity Biopiper or the Spoilpox Scrivener. I think all they do is improve units that you do not want to take anyway, or the units that they are improving, they don't improve enough to make their points valuable. The 3 brothers, like Orgot Demon Spew and Globe, I feel they're too expensive to do anything. Orgot Demon Spew has a decent command ability, but he's 12 wounds with a 4-up save. In order to use that command ability, you're spending command points, which means you're not making him more durable with a Harbinger because you can't afford your resources like that. Blobe is 240 points. He casts 1 spell. I could take 2 sorcerers for less than that. I could take 2 Chaos Sorcerer Lords for 220 still get off the 2 spells, get 2 Mystic Shields, and honestly be in a better place than his 240 points. Twiceborn's the third one. He's the best of his brothers in combat and durability, but he makes all of his points up in using Nurglings, and Nurgling's best value is deep striking them, which means he's not going to be in range to buff the Nurglings. So why are you running him if it's not narrative?
Exactly. Yeah. No, I totally agree with your points.
Yeah.
Now, I have 2 more questions. You kind of like answered the very last one, the MVPs, and you actually added one that I'm kind of really happy that you did about like what doesn't work in your list and what the opposite of an MVP is.
Yeah.
But one of the questions would be one thing you must change before the army can never change again. Like, so say for example, Games Workshop, all of a sudden, this comes from a little PTSD with my Tomb Kings. They're kind of a compendium army. They will never change. They've officially said that they will remain as they are. And so I was kind of interested to see how other people might react if their battle tomes did that. So say, for example, Nurgle will never change again. What's the one thing you would change before they get locked out forever?
Honestly,
they're perfect. Nothing.
I know, yeah, like, because Nurgle is... If you change something in the Nurgle list, then I'm just okay, cool. I'm gonna borrow Slaves to Darkness, because Nurgle borrows from so many books. I don't like the rules. I think are fine. The summoning points can be a bit more aggressive. It's the mirror match isn't always fun, so that's a problem that could be fixed. But I think the only problem with Nurgle is some of the points. Like Plague Bears are too expensive in 10s and 20s. But there's so many, like, I actually find, like, if I could play my old Nurgle list and ignore all of the Slaves to Darkness changes and the Plague Monk changes, I'd be fine. Mostly because I feel like like I'm cheating when I charge 21 inches with Chaos Marauders. That is not something that feels flavorful to me. But maybe Nurgle can deal with a bit more of a CP generation.
Okay.
But because the reason why I'm not a big fan of the Harbinger of Decay is because if you're taking him, you're always using your command ability. And Nurgle doesn't have a lot of great ways to use their command abilities in other outlets. So if I'm taking a Harbinger of Decay, I'm never going to be able to use another command ability unless I have a battalion, unless I have Aether Quartz. Okay. And I'm not going to have Aether Quartz unless I have a battalion because I'm taking the Wither Staff. So
would you say maybe fixing some of the redundancies in the book, like making actually maybe like a useful, making a bunch of the units that nobody would take like useful? Or
the problem with that is a lot of those redundancies are in other books.
Okay.
So, like, because Nurgle is taking from Tarmokan's Horde, they're taking from Clan Pestilence, they're taking from Slaves to Darkness, they're taking from random Forge World models. They have the demons, they have the mortals. There's so many different options to draw from that fixing the redundancies is really changing 3 or 4 separate armies.
Yeah. Okay. I see your point, because they got their tentacles, as it were, in so many different tomes. Then
exactly, like I can take a sorcerer for 120. I can take a Chaos Sorcerer Lord for 110. There's reasons to take the sorcerer, and that's usually if I want Blades of Putrefaction or if I need him in a battalion. Otherwise, I'm never going to take him. And I always take the Chaos Sorcerer Lord because he's 110 points instead of 120. And he gives me, and they'll have different access to different spell lures, but that's part of the trade-off. So if Nurgle was never going to change again, it just comes down to points. I feel like if the Glotkin was 400, you'd suddenly see a spike in Clan Pestilence armies.
Right.
Just because then he could be allied into that. And I think that'd be a great, fun change for that army, is being able to take a Glocken as an ally.
Maybe he can give them some of the rules, like, for example, Gortrek, where you can ally him in even though he breaks the allegiance kind of point limit.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see that with happen with a few of the other factions. To get their own, this model breaks the rules for allies, you can take them in here. But once again, who knows? I don't even know what character I'd like to see that on. And Death is kind of so mono-Nagash, it kind of doesn't even make sense for it to exist in there. There's one more thing you want to talk about, the people trying crazy lists.
Yeah, but right after this last question,
sure.
Which is kind of the standard, Games Workshop just announced Maggotkin 2.0, right?
Sure.
So, and the battle tome is getting, I mean, of course, this is all hypothetical, but
sure.
The battle tome is getting a total makeover, complete makeover. Like, they're getting like everything changed. What would you keep if that happened?
I'd want to see the play style stay the same. I want to be able to see the fact that they are still the deceptively fast army, that they look slow, but it has tips and tricks in order to make themselves very, very fast. Because you can take a Great Unclean One to give everyone +3 inches of movement. You can have the wheel go +2, and suddenly your 4-inch guys are running and charging, and they're going 11, 12, 18 inches before a charge.
Yeah. So you like their speed, but not on paper. Like, on paper, they're slow, but then with all the shenanigans, like, they're zooming around the table. And you like that. Okay.
I like the fact that you're able to use the stuff from other books, so you do have all those other outlets to borrow stuff from. I like that. I like the theme of the wheel. I think a few of the spots can be changed because spots 3 and 4 are they're doing nothing for you. Reroll Battle Shock Test of 1 is mostly irrelevant, especially when it already exists on your Plague Bearers unit, so it's a redundancy in abilities. And spot 3 is cool, like terrain is going to start doing the damage to people, but it's only on a 5-up, and it's only from my turn. And then right after that bad ability, I get the 4 ability, which is also bad. So changing those spots on the wheel, I think would be fun. Do something a bit more so something happens on every turn. Spot 2 is very powerful. Spot 5 is very powerful. Spot 6 is something cool. Spot 7 heals. Spots 3 and 4 are dead to me. So being able to do that is great. I think the summoning can be changed a bit. The mechanic about where you're placing it and how you're generating it off the trees is fine. I think that having the fact that it doesn't scale with the game is a bit of a problem, because if I'm playing a small 500-point game, I can certainly summon in 500 points over the course of the game, and that's a problem for people playing small games. So, or 1,000 points, I suddenly have 300 extra. In a 2,000-point game, that's not that big of a deal. 500 points, that's huge. 1,000 points, that's huge. Right. So it really comes down to that.
Yeah, I was playing some meeting engagement games right before the lockdown, and I noticed how gigantic the summoning mechanic was in the lower points games for like 1,000 points, and I was kind of feeling a little bad,
Yeah, no, summoning is something that scales with the other factions. Khorne, it's about how many units die. If you're playing a 10,000-point game, units are going to die left and right. You're going to hit your cap of 8. If you're playing a 500-point game, units aren't going to die that quickly. Tzeentch is all about spells being cast. If you're larger the game, the more wizards, the more spells are cast. Soness is all about heroes taking damage and wounding people. More units on the table, more likely that's going to happen. Nurgle is just flat. It's always consistent. And while I like that that's flavorful in a way, it does need to change for balance's sake, in my opinion.
Okay, very good, very good. And yeah, so that's kind of it. So let's talk about the digital versus real army lists. So
Yeah.
again, because of the times we live in, a lot of people are playing digitally to scratch that itch, as it were.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are building and thinking about lists that they would never even consider playing in the real, like, person-to-person games.
Yeah.
So how would you comment on that with Nurgle? Because right now, certain like lists are like that. You would never see, like, for example, like Fire Slayers. You don't see Fire Slayers anymore on tabletop tactics. You do like one or two like games, but
Yeah.
you know,
I mean, I think it comes down to you find an army that fits a play style that you like. I tried playing Fire Slayers right after playing my Nurgle, and it was such a slow army compared to Nurgle. I shelved them immediately. So it's using Tabletop Simulator is a great, fun way to try a new army. Trying out any of these lists, if you can find the model for the War Mammoth, let me know, because I would love to try that list out.
okay.
The one thing I do have to say is when you play digitally, the measuring isn't always going to be accurate, and Nurgle does deal a lot with very small auras of 7 inches, so it can be a bit temperamental.
That's why I
Um,
use Universal Battles too. It's
yeah,
super accurate.
I
It's
haven't
not.
tried that.
Yeah, we should try it out. It's really good.
Okay, sure.
It's not
Um,
sexy like whatsoever. If you're looking for like a really good looking kind of game, whatever, it looks like the old 1990 kind of battle reports as you find in
okay.
White Dwarf.
I
Kind
remember
of
those.
top down view with a little like measuring
Yeah,
gauges. But I really like this because it's really good for competitive thinking, and it's
yeah,
really good for understanding really tactically the game.
yeah. So I definitely think Nurgle is an army that has great ways to buy into it because you always start with a start collecting demons. It's going to give you right away your summoning stuff, and then you go straight for however you want to build them out. If you want to, because they have 4 start collecting boxes. Because you have the Skaven one can be made into Clan Pestilence. The Slaves to Darkness can be used for you. The Nurgle Demons, as I already mentioned, and the um, and the and the Slaves to Darkness. So start with the Nurgle Demons because you're always going to need it for summoning.
Mhm.
Or if you don't even want to go for the Nurglings or the drones, just get a box of plague bearers and start there. See if you even like painting them, because some people don't like the little details and the guts and whatnot, and the holes that are in the models, and then go forward from there. Figure out how you want to play. There's a lot of different styles of play. Like, you can be hyper defensive, you can be hyper aggressive, you can form that moving castle, you can form those alpha blocks, you can play a very mortal wound splashy army, you can play all clan pestilence and have 3 like little blocks of chaos warriors just doodling in the back and just have fun with that.
Mhm.
Play, just go at it and have fun.
Yeah, absolutely. But how did your thinking towards the army list change when the physical constraints of an actual model like disappear? Like, did you say, "Oh, okay, now that I can actually test armies that are like 800 models large, like, did you want to like test out certain lists, or it doesn't really matter?"
For me, I think moving 800 models digitally is a lot worse than moving them 800 models on a because I can get so I've actually been switching to armies that use less models.
Okay, so more elite. Okay,
Yeah.
that's an answer.
Well,
Okay.
like I said earlier, I'm working on Ogre list, and I have in that list, I'm using 40 Noblars, and I'm just like, these are staying here. I'm never moving them, and they're just going to be a screen, and I'm never touching them. Everything else is going to be a unit of 12 or less, and this is what I move, and that's how I play.
Okay. Okay,
But
that's pretty. That's pretty hard-lined kind of tactics, but yeah. Okay.
Well, I'm using the junk mob battalion, so they have to stay in front of the. They have to stay near the stonehorn, not the stonehorns, the catapults.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm like, they're just there to screen. I'm taking them because I need it, and this is my fun list, and I don't have to worry about moving models individually in a screen. And I think that's another thing that's very annoying when playing digitally. I mean, obviously, I've only tried Tabletop Simulator. I haven't tried the version that you're talking about, but you have to keep in mind, you have to have that leniency for measuring when playing these games. And you just, Nurgle is such, once again, you have 61 war scrolls, not even going into the allies that you can take, and just try it out, have fun. And if you don't like I personally, I recommend trying it with the Slaves to Darkness, because if you don't like that, go off and use them in a different army. Have fun. Right. There's so many different ways to play Nurgle or so many ways to play Nurgle with different models. That
I mean, maybe because the whole like branching out of the army is so gigantic, maybe we can have you back for like maybe like a little short series, like of 3 episodes, just to go through everything. So people kind of understand and can get their heads around all the different various ways you can use Nurgle. So,
like I've only talked about like 4 or 5 of the units from Slaves to Darkness, and they have like I'd even talk about how I like Marauder Horsemen in this list as like a nice little mobile harassing unit. But there's just a lot of things that work really well in this list, surprisingly.
Very cool, man. Very cool. Well, I mean, thank you so much for joining us.
I will be ready to be back whenever you will have me.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Yeah, I enjoy doing this.
Nice. So, okay, folks. So that's episode 3 wrapping up. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, and also don't forget to ding the dong, the little bell, to get all the notifications for new and upcoming episodes. So, Dan, thank you so much for joining us again. Say goodbye to all the boys and girls, and we'll see you soon, yeah?
Yeah, of course. See you then.
All right, take care, bye.
Bye.